Come on, go!
My name's Tim. I'm a musician, a car collector, an automotive journalist, and a lover of all things automotive. I've bought and sold collectible cars for 2 decades, and I hope my experiences and my point of view helps you find the car of your dreams. I love the Mark I Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. The smaller bumpers and fine details make it really stand out from the later Series 2 car. This car speaks to opulence and wealth in the 60s, 70s, and 80s like nothing else. When I talk about my Arnage, a lot of times I talk about how many hours it took to create. These cars weren't so much hours. Depending on spec, it took between 3 and 4 months to build one of these cars. That's crazy. And I go on and on about how that connection to luxury is something we're really missing, but there's a fair amount of these built. And with about 25,000 total split between 16,000 early Series 1 cars and about 8,500 Series 2 cars, there's lots of them out there. Some of them haven't been really well loved, so when you find one that has been, like this car, that had serious recommissioning work, you almost have to buy it. And boy, am I glad I did. The story of this Silver Shadow is unique. First of all, this car, I don't know if you can tell from this video, but like, it's funny, even though it has, this is the later 6.7, 6 3/4 liter. I always want to say 6.75 liter engine. This car is so smooth that you wonder, is it on? When, after you start it, it's like, it's just butter smooth. It reminds me of the 90s Lexus commercial. That's how smooth this car is. I was not looking for a Silver Shadow. This isn't a car that has always been on my, must-have. I did kind of always want a Corniche, but this Silver Shadow, which is quite powerful, and I mean, we're already up to highway speeds, really landed in my lap. I went to buy a TT Mark I. I've used TT Mark I's as drivers on and off throughout, pretty much forever, as sort of just runabout cars. I went to look at a car at a gentleman's place, and he had a hangar for airplanes. And in that hangar, he had some cars. And he said, hey, you want to look at some other cars? We got to talking. He found out I had a bunch of cars. Showed me a Land Rover 109 that immediately I was like, yeah, okay, that's totally me. So I ended up with this Land Rover. Which is great because I hadn't had a 109 in years. But this Silver Shadow ended up, he's like, well, what about a Rolls Royce? And I took a look at this Silver Shadow, and I do really like the Series 1 cars. I like the small bumpers. I think it's more pure, and I think it's really the look that these cars sort of deserve. The later cars, the big Federal bumpers and all that, I don't know, just kind of maligned the car for me. And honestly, I love this color combination. It's so subtle. I do like the two-tone, but they have a tendency to be sort of garish and beautiful in the two-tone. With this car, they kind of shifted more towards a driver spec car, a car that would be driven, but that you could be driven in. It's a very smooth car. It's a very comfortable car inside, and it's one of those things where, the Silver Cloud in the earlier Rolls Royces, while I think it's fun to show up in them at car shows and that sort of thing, it's definitely a car that is more of a car to be driven in. Whereas this, it's an enjoyable car to drive. It has significantly overboosted steering. I mean, which you would expect. You never have to sort of put too much effort into it, I guess I'd say. It doesn't even have a temperature gauge in it. I mean, it's very much like sort of minimalist, and it's got a very, vintage vibe. It's interesting, even the clock in this car is analog, and the prior owner, the clock had failed and spent like a ton of money to have this sort of antiquated clock replaced in this car. And one of the things I love about this particular car is it's had considerable recommissioning via Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce dealer did the recommissioning for an elderly gentleman who ended up passing, not long after it was done. And it's it's a beautiful car. The interesting thing is, like, with the Arnage, every car evokes something in someone, in an onlooker. And Ferraris, a lot of times everyone wishes they had a Ferrari. With different cars just have different sort of emotions that they bring about. In this particular car, I was kind of surprised because, this is one of those cars that Rolls-Royce made a fair amount of. So it's not super rare, but I couldn't tell you the last time I saw one on the road. And I think that's because, these dipped down into where they were really inexpensive. And some people that got them, people bought them just to sort of run them into the ground, or maybe they couldn't afford to keep them going. And this one is, it's just a lovely car. And I think when people see it, I could not believe how much, I don't know, I didn't really expect for it to garner any attention. But people love this car, and not just older people, not just guys that were, in their 40s or 20s, even in the 70s when this car was new. Although I guess they'd be really old if they were 40s in the 70s. But anyways, people love this car, and I think for the price that these cars are right now, definitely a bargain. And like, I don't know if this one will stay in. I almost don't know why I would sell it, but at the same time, it's one of those things where everything has a price, and I wonder, I don't know. We'll see if it stays, but it's a lovely car, absolutely. And I think if you've always wanted a Silver Shadow, maybe you'll enjoy this one. With any used car, buy the best one you can. I mean, I don't think that's ever been more important than with a car of this caliber. Things can be so expensive on this car. Even the Spirit of Ecstasy on the nose. You're going to be hard pressed to find another perfect one not associated with the car. All the little bits, all the electronics, all the wiring, all the engine, transmission, everything on the car is expensive. There's no sugarcoating that. This one's had over $35,000, $40,000 in work spent on it. In fact, I ended up selling this car to a dear friend, and one of the things that needed put right on the car is the right front shock absorber. Now, the right front shock absorber on this car is just a standard tube shock. They're like $1,600 a piece. You have to use the right ones. Now, there is great support for both modern cars like the Arnage, or even more modern like the Mulsanne, and this car from places like Flying Spares. There are communities online like Facebook groups and that sort of thing of people who own these cars, take care of these cars, and I would say there might even be more information about the Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow than there is about the later Arnage. Ultimately, it's going to be about, if the car resonates with you, buy the best one you can find. Do not buy the first one that pops up, and definitely do not buy one that's filled with rot or that just has all sorts of mechanical issues, because it can be painfully expensive to put right. One thing to consider with both of these cars, the Arnage and also the Silver Shadow, is that they were very expensive new. And while they may be more inexpensive now, ultimately, I think we're going into a time, particularly if electric cars continue to be the way, where something like this that's just so substantial, so classic, so timeless, will really be a fantastic way to get around. I mean, imagine yourself 15 years from now wafting around in a car like this. I mean, people already lose their minds when they see it, but this car is so special in so many little different ways. Every nut, every bolt, everything about the car is just very hand-built, very special. And I think, again, if this car resonates with you, I think it's one for the ages, for sure. For me, the more modern car, probably because I was younger when it was out, the Arnage was sort of an aspirational car when I was a kid, really floats my boat. If you're a little bit older than me, I think this might be your perfect saloon.